Welcome to the DecisionWise podcast series. My name is Justin Warner, and I will be your host for today's podcast. I'm joined today by Christian Nielson, a DecisionWise principal consultant. As a principal consultant at DecisionWise, Christian leads a consulting team focused on leadership and organizational development. He and his team partner with organizations to identify unique improvement opportunities and bring about meaningful change. Christian's consulting experience includes working as a manager for PricewaterhouseCoopers in their people and change advisory practices and as a senior organizational development consultant for Intermountain Healthcare. His broad expertise covers leadership development, coaching, employee engagement, organizational change, team building, group facilitation, and process improvement. Some of his past clients include Google, NBC, McDonald's, and Hilton Hotel. Christian, thanks for being with us today.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You bet. This month, our podcast will focus on the DecisionWise Employee Engagement Magic Model. The best-selling book, Magic, The 5 Keys to Unlock the Power of Employee Engagement, specifically outlines each of the 5 keys and their impact on building employee engagement within our organization. The 5 magic keys are meaning, autonomy, growth, impact, and connection. Today, we're going to be discussing autonomy and its relationship with employee engagement. So, Christian, when we get started today, let's first begin by discussing autonomy and what it's not. In the workplace, there are a lot of definitions or interpretations of autonomy. So maybe let's take a first stab at some of the misconceptions surrounding autonomy in the workplace.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. In my experience, when you talk about autonomy, a lot of times managers or C-suite, they hear anarchy. And autonomy, it certainly isn't anarchy. We can give people freedom to choose how to do their best work without completely removing accountability or regulations and process. Those things can still be observed, and in fact should be observed to create proper autonomy. It's more about just empowering the individual to do their best work.
That's great. And so when we talk about that with autonomy and empowering someone to do their best work, there's obviously a level of trust that has to be accompanying with autonomy. Do you mind talking a little bit about how trust relates to autonomy and how those two work together?
Yeah. Trust is foundational for employee engagement and especially for the autonomy component of engagement. If we don't trust people, then we're going to micromanage. We're going to always be watching them. We're going to try to control them. We'll treat them more like pieces of a machine rather than whole complete people bringing all of their talents and abilities to the role. And so we limit their ability to contribute if we don't trust them, and if trust isn't found in our organization. It's a complete limiting factor for engagement, the amount of trust that we have there.
Great. So the Magic Book, 5 Keys to Unlocking the Power of Employee Engagement, talks about motivation when we talk about autonomy. And it talks about intrinsic and extrinsic motivational factors. Can you just spend a couple of minutes talking about how those two elements, motivation, impact autonomy?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you can get into a virtuous cycle with autonomy and motivation. For example, in my current role, I have a lot of autonomy, and it's, for me, very motivating. Basically, it's saying, the organization's saying, hey, we trust you to make good decisions, to do good work, and to almost impress us with your contribution. And for me, that's very motivating. I want to step into that space and explore and see what I can do to contribute and to build and to grow our business, as well as the value that our clients receive and our methodologies and our thought leadership, all of those things. It's a very, very inviting thing. And because of that, when I step in and contribute, then the organization usually says, wow, that's great. Here's more autonomy. And because I get more autonomy, it's more motivating. I want to do more and grow. And so that freedom or that trust or that vote of confidence that the organization gives me actually triggers something inside of me, a drive to contribute, to do more, to explore and produce. It's why I love what I do. And the opposite is true. If we restrict that autonomy, we also limit the invitation to the employee. If we take away some of that freedom to do their best work, we're basically limiting how much we're inviting them to contribute. And so we're going to get less out of them. It's going to be less rewarding for the organization and for the employee.
Yeah. So if I'm a manager and I want to give autonomy to my employees, I think one of the things that would concern me is that element of accountability, right? How do you manage accountability when it comes to autonomy, right? Because again, we have this conception that autonomy is anarchy.
Yeah,
So
right.
how do we mesh those two worlds?
That's a great question. And getting that balance right, I think, is something critical for every manager. How do we balance autonomy with accountability, and clarity and transparency is the best approach that I've seen. Where let's have clear expectations for what success looks like. Let's also be really transparent around where we have constraints. For example, when I work with organizations with their accounting department, well, we can't give our accountants autonomy because that's fraud or that's illegal. And when we're not talking about, hey, let's go break every rule out there, but let's be really transparent about the constraints we have to work around. Where do we have regulations? Where do we have limiting factors outside of our control? And then what can I as a manager and you as an employee do to give you leeway within the structure around us for you to do your best work? And so there's transparency around, let's talk about the environment we're working in, the realities of our situation there, as well as my expectations for success in your role. I want you to hit these metrics. We want to provide X, Y, and Z for our clients, those types of things. And then just have a real open conversation or open dialogue around what we're working with and where they have room to play and to explore their best work.
Great. Maybe keep going down that road a little bit, Christian, and talk about a client or an experience that you've had where you've seen autonomy really be a driver of employee engagement in an organization that you've worked with, or a couple of examples.
Yeah, I have a software client, a technology firm on the East Coast, and they've done a really great job where they're not focusing as much on process. They've got best practice, they've got process, they've got all the things that you need to have an operational efficiency, but that's not where their focus is. Their focus is always on the customer. They keep coming back to what are we doing for the customer, and it's everyone understands that common purpose. And they've also provided everyone with the autonomy to meet that objective. So if I'm in a programming role or something like that, I don't need to go through 6 levels of red tape to do something custom for my customer. I have leeway to go out and serve the customer because that's the point on the horizon we're all swimming towards. And so they've done a really great job of creating a singular view of what success looks like, but then 2, then saying, okay, now go out and do it, and we'll do our best to support you, but we're in many ways not going to get in your way as you go out and serve the customer. And because of that, we've seen their engagement climb year after year. We've worked with this organization for a number of years, and we've seen them just progressively improve in a number of areas, and including overall engagement. And they're in that cycle I mentioned where they're inviting employees to do their best work. Employees are meeting that challenge, and each year the trust increases and the results improve.
Great. So for our listeners who are out there, they might be thinking, well, we have autonomy within our organization, or we have limited autonomy. Yeah. How might they be able to identify how well they're doing with empowering people, giving them the autonomy or the right kinds of autonomy?
Well, there's a number of ways. Obviously, I'm a fan of surveys. That we do a lot of work with surveys. An annual survey, making sure that where you're polling your organization or your employees, you are asking questions around trust, around autonomy. And we've got several that we've grown to love that have been very effective at helping us measure autonomy, improve autonomy, those types of things. As well as you can do a kind of an informal audit where you walk around and look How are people working? When are people working? Look at exit interviews or exit surveys. We often do exit surveys for our clients, and we can see, hey, I'm leaving not because of compensation, not because of this, but because I feel like I can't do what I need to do here for my customer or for myself. And so look for evidence there, as well as there's, if you've got a little bit more of a trained eye on this stuff, you can look for symbols of distrust. Are you using surveillance cameras to track how long people go on break? And if you are, why are you doing that? And is there another way to approach that? Because you want to run an organization, not a prison. And there's symbols of distrust that can be pretty extreme. I've seen that example I just mentioned. I've also seen organizations use GPS in their company vehicles to track if people are taking the most direct routes to get to areas. And I understand there's usually real reasons they start doing some of those things, but you can quickly go down a path of distrust that constricts autonomy and limits what employees can bring to the role.
Great. Well, Christian, thank you for your time today. And maybe in closing, as we talk about autonomy, how it relates to the other 5 keys of driving employee engagement, and what impact does autonomy have on engagement overall? Maybe just close with your thoughts around how it relates to the other 5 keys and its overall driving factor.
Yeah. And the 5 keys, meaning, autonomy, growth, impact, and connection, all relate to each other and feed each other for, so in general, if we think through, well, let's go back to that example of the software company where they've said, hey, our meaning is in our customer. Great. Well, that's meaning. How do we support that? Well, we need to give people autonomy to do that work. And so they'll get a greater sense of meaning if we set that clear meaning up front, reinforce that, as well as empower them to pursue that and to fulfill our mission and our meaning. It also helps them recognize individual impact. If I have freedom to do that type of work, to be in charge of my own success, suddenly that my sense of impact grows. We talk about in the book, we talk about different kinds of autonomy. For example, social autonomy. Do I get to choose who I work with on my team? Do I get to leverage the resources in the organization as I need them? So that the connection piece comes into play, as well as growth. Am I challenging myself? Am I pushing myself? Is the organization supportive of that, encouraging me to do that? My autonomy and my role is directly tied to my growth, because I get to go out and try things that are maybe outside of my comfort zone, and the organization supports that and helps me pursue some of those things. So it's an ecosystem. It's a balance. Autonomy is key. It's also, I love that we're focusing on it today, because I think it's a little bit of it's less obvious to a lot of organizations. We know people want to grow. We know we need to have a clear vision and some purpose in our work. And connection, all these things are important. Sometimes autonomy falls by the wayside. We don't realize people need some license and trust and to go out and do the work as they see fit. They need feedback, encouragement, accountability, but they really need the space to do their best work.
Great. Christian, thank you again for being here with us today. Thank you for listening. Hopefully this has been insightful as we talk about the 5 keys of building employee engagement, meaning, autonomy, growth, impact, and connection.
Thanks, Justin.